Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, in the news today, we have heroin addiction on the rise, and an interesting reason people are getting addicted to it today. Now, we also have an article on a once beautiful river that turned a nasty orange due to a toxic spill. We're going to talk about more airstrikes taking place in Syria. But first, we're going to start off talking about BRICS. And we're not talking here about the bricks that you build with. We're actually talking about an acronym that stands for a couple countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it's an alliance of these nations that are trying to create their own financial stability outside of the U.S. So interesting article there. Yeah. Well, the President and First Lady just made history as they finished up their second visit to India. President Obama is the first U.S. president to visit the country twice during office, and while there, he became the first president to be the chief guest at India's Republic Day parade. But China has been trying to rain on the America's parade in India, warning the country to avoid a, quote, zero-sum trap, which they think is being set by Washington and its allies.
Interesting. Well, China's view is that India is being singled out and even pressured to become a key ally in order to slow China's steady rise in power. In an effort to strengthen its bond with India during the Republic Day parade, China's president expressed China's willingness to, quote, make concerted efforts with India to lift their strategic cooperative partnership oriented to peace and prosperity to a higher level.
So what does this back and forth over India really mean? And is the United States trying to drive a wedge between India and China? Well, in an interview with RT, journalist, professor, and former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy under Ronald Reagan, Mr. Paul Craig Roberts, explains what the U.S. has to lose if India sticks with China.
That's right. According to Mr. Roberts, the United States is very concerned about India's recent trade agreement with Russia and, of course, being a part of BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which we just mentioned, which is an alliance of nations to create their own source of financial stability free from the American dollar, so they can kind of get out from underneath that umbrella there.
Well, Roberts says BRICS is very significant as an economical powerhouse to rival the United States on the world scene for the following reasons. The populations and the landmass of those areas is enormous, and southern China has taken over the lead of economic development from all of the countries, and India has had a good bit of development in professional tradable skills. And so it does have the potential of abandoning the use of the dollar, of leaving the Western financial mechanisms and clearing mechanisms, and this then is a direct threat to the exchange value of the American dollar.
Mr. Roberts continued by saying, so it does have the potential of forming a kind of trade relationship that undermines the ability of the United States to control all the outcomes. Washington is very control-oriented, he said. It has a lot of control because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, because of the tendency of the European countries to follow Washington's lead. And so it sees the BRICS as a real challenge to Washington's ability to control outcomes. So it will do whatever it can, that is, the United States will, to break it up.
Now, in the past decades, the U.S. has been very controlling over a lot of these nations through a variety of means, including trade, willingness to import goods, or to allow cheaper goods to be sold in the U.S., as well as more specific issues like controlling foreign aid that goes out. BRICS, however, is creating its own system of trade and financing to help smaller developing nations so they are not reliant on the United States.
Roberts explains it's getting more and more difficult for Washington to see the world as a unipolar place where they call all the shots. And the sanctions currently placed on Russia, Mr. Roberts says, warns all other countries that the same thing can happen to us. We've got to get out of that American system and have our own so that we're not subject to this economic bullying.
Well, we go from looking at the United States' position on world economics to its position on nuclear weapons. Now, in the 1960s, President John F. Kennedy made his historic speech about nuclear disarmament at the American University in Washington, D.C. Just this week, President Obama gave his own speech in the very same place concerning the importance of a nuclear deal with Iran.
But this time, unlike 50 years ago, the president had to defend the deal against criticism, the strongest of which comes from Israel. President Obama gave no compliments to his Israeli counterpart, and in fact, some are suggesting this is the U.S.'s biggest anti-Israel speech to date. Unlike JFK, who had no one to dispute, former president, his ideas at the time, Obama is facing harsh criticism from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
When the nuclear agreement was made, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu boldly said, "What a stunning, historic mistake." But President Obama sees this as his legacy, which he made clear in this speech that he doesn't care what Israel thinks, saying, when the interim deal was announced, critics, the same critics we're hearing from now, calling it a historic mistake, the critics were wrong. The progress of Iran's nuclear program was halted. So he was only making reference there to what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said.
Sure. That's some bold talking there. Also, during his speech, President Obama separated Israel out from the rest of the world, stating that all countries pretty much agree to have this deal in place except for the Israeli government. But at the same time, it was reported that Obama met the Jewish leaders in America and told them that if this deal does not go through, America may be forced to bomb nuclear facilities in Iran. Such a move would certainly cause terror against Israel.
Well, Russia is also continuing to have its own problems with Western countries, including the U.S., Canada, and Europe. While Moscow banned most food imports from Western countries last year in retaliation for sanctions imposed on Russia by the West over its involvement in the crisis in Ukraine, there are complaints that items are still being smuggled into the country and sold to Russians.
Russia is getting tough on the meat imports being smuggled in from these countries in an effort to stop it. Just a few weeks ago, President Putin signed a special decree which states that when these banned foods are found, they will be confiscated and destroyed.
Mikhail Dunin, a representative from the Russian Food Safety Agency, explained what would be done when the illegal meats and other products were found. He said these products will be loaded onto our transport and accompanied by the state inspectors, delivered to the disposal plant, and then will be destroyed by burning.
Not everyone agrees with Putin, though. There's been offers to give this food to the poor, send it to Africa, send it to eastern Ukraine, but to no avail. The president's decree is being carried out.
Well, the FDA is sending out a stern warning to hospitals, alerting them to the possibility of potential hacking to a commonly used medical device, the Hospira Symbic Infusion System. Now, this device is used to deliver medications to patients, and we're talking like antibiotics here, and also painkillers through an IV. Well, in the FDA warning, it states an unauthorized user with malicious intent could access the pump remotely and modify the dosage it delivers.
Oh, that's some scary stuff right there. Experts say that every hospital that has devices connected to the internet are at risk. Now, this isn't an isolated incident, they say, but it's definitely an important warning. The device's manufacturer, Hospira, said it deployed an important update to provide its customers an extra layer of security until the pump is completely off the market in a few months, which was a move that actually already started before this took place.
Well, this latest event comes on the heels of Fiat Chrysler when they made a recall to 1.4 million vehicles due to the vulnerability of their vehicles being hacked, as we showed in one of our previous broadcasts. Right. Now, the FDA says there's no specific attempt that prompted this warning, but said there's a real possibility that this could happen. So before it does, let's go ahead and take the precautions and solve the problem.
Right. According to the latest numbers, more Americans are using heroin than ever. This has gotten Congress's attention and created a movement to create reforms. Between 2008 and 2011, there has been a 232% increase of heroin seizures by the DEA, and currently there are at least 600,000 heroin users in the U.S., and heroin overdose now kills more Americans than traffic accidents.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, this type of drug use was once considered a local problem, but is now being put on the government for help. Experts are now saying locking people up is no longer the answer. They, referring to the drug users, need help. So why are the numbers getting so high? Well, the gateway to this increase is in prescription drugs, and that's why it's covering such a broader array of social classes. It starts with addiction to prescription pills, which becomes too expensive, so they turn to heroin. So for this reason, local law enforcement says they need help, but the federal government doesn't have a solution to this problem.
Well, one of the suggestions that came from Michael Botticelli, White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, he said that family members and first responders be equipped with the antidote to heroin overdose. So, not really work to solve the problem initially, but here's an antidote so that they don't die. It doesn't really change them from continuing to use it, but this will at least keep them from dying.
And interestingly enough, Katan, they note that this increase started with the abuse of prescription drugs. Now, prescriptions have, of course, they have to be written by doctors. Right. So it's interesting to see that this illegal use and the abuse of the drugs started, it actually started out with the legal use of drugs, again, written by the doctors, kind of getting them hooked almost, and then they took it from there.
Interesting. So apparently the guys on the streets in the dark alleys are not the only drug dealers, seems like. Well, from worthless food to contaminated air, YPN's Larry McGee has our coverage on the reemergence of a rare bacterial disease in the Colorado River made worse this week by the very agency responsible for protecting it. Larry, what do you have for us?
During a time period where the environment is out of control and producing record high temperatures, the heat of summer is often made cool by the modern marvels of ventilation and air conditioning. In the famed South Bronx area of New York, however, the cooling tower of many facilities are under suspicion due to the largest outbreak of Legionnaires disease in the city's history. The towers are suspected of spreading and providing safe haven for the disease, which has taken the lives of 10 citizens and infected at least 100 in the area so far. The towers are scheduled to be analyzed, checked, and cleared for safety within the coming 2 weeks, per instructions from the city's mayor, Bill de Blasio. According to medical experts, the bacteria which produces Legionnaires naturally occurs in places like rivers and lakes and travels through water to treatment plants, where it is not eliminated as effectively as some may suppose. The wayward bacteria makes its way from there into buildings, where it is then capable of infecting and sickening a potential host. Medical practitioners say that the disease is treatable, depending on whether or not a doctor makes certain choices concerning antibiotics. Penicillin, for example, is believed to worsen the disease. Things are continuing to get worse nonetheless, however, where the all-important element of water is concerned, after the EPA spilled 1 million gallons of toxic sludge into a river in southern Colorado. Local residents are voicing concern with regard to the wastewater and the impact it will have on local fishing, which is already suffering due to other forms of abuse. EPA officials have accepted full accountability for the incident, acknowledging that heavy metals like arsenic and cadmium are now circulating throughout the river. Experts such as Ashish Basu say that the implications of this week's spill goes far beyond just the appearance of the river. The Anamesa River runs 12 miles and is a source of drinking water for the towns that are surrounding it. The University of Texas professor says that the heavy metals in the river are dangerous to human life, but proposes that the best option to address the spill is to let the river continue to run its course. For the professor of geochemistry in Arlington, where these sorts of matters are concerned, dilution is the best solution. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Katan had said that with all our technology, the best expert's advice is just go ahead and let it dilute.
Yeah.
Well, Russia's Sergei Lavrov condemned the U.S. airstrikes in Syria. U.S. officials say they're going to give air support to the Syrian rebels that the U.S. trained. U.S. National Security Council spokesman Alistair Baske said, "We will take the steps necessary to ensure that their forces could successfully carry out their mission."
Speaking anonymously, U.S. officials said that if the Syrian government forces attack the rebel forces, the U.S. will engage the Syrian government forces. Now, this is a much different policy, but falls in line with the U.S.'s view on the Assad regime that, according to Secretary Kerry, who said Assad and Assad regime has lost its legitimacy. Well, the U.S.'s goal, they say, is to train Syrian rebels and to protect them against attacks as part of their strategy to combat ISIS.
Now, it's unsure who exactly that the U.S. will be attacking and defending from the air because, according to U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, it's hard to identify people who meet the criteria of being those who can be trusted. Now, critics of the Obama policy on bombing Syria say that it's a mess on the ground and it's about to get messier.
Sounds like it. Well, the U.S. says it has carried out its first drone attack against ISIS from Turkey, a Turkish Air Force base. This comes 1 month after Ankara gave the U.S. permission to use its air base. Turkey's foreign minister says that the U.S.-Turkey joint battles will soon take place against the Takfiri group. Many are waiting to see the result of U.S.-Turkey cooperation against terrorism, and Syrian authorities say that they consider it a breach of the country's sovereignty if such cooperation leads to airstrikes without prior coordination with Damascus. Well, if these things have got you scratching your head wondering just exactly where our society is headed to next, you don't have to worry anymore. Yisrael Hawkins and the House of Yahweh has been foretelling these events that mankind is bringing upon himself because of not following the laws written in the Holy Scriptures. But he also brings forth the peaceful solution that you and your family can start to practice now to ensure your safety and health. To find out more, you can contact the House of Yahweh.
And when you do, don't forget to request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Now, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. Now, you can also check out our new website, www.ypnnews.com. And to email the House of Yahweh, send your emails to info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Sit tight. Up next, the one authorized to bring forth the true peaceful solution to all the world's problems, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.